The first shots lit up the darkness of space like 1,000 suns being born at once. The Xanthian fleet opened fire with precision, targeting the human ships with weapons that had destroyed fortified positions on 100 worlds. Krelver stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, watching the tactical displays with the confidence of someone who had seen this scenario play out countless times. The humans would fight bravely, perhaps destroy a few ships, then break and run when they realized the futility of resistance. 10 minutes into the battle, Krelver began to realize something was wrong. The human ships weren't fighting like a conventional fleet. They moved with a coordination that seemed impossible for such a small force. When one ship drew fire, another would appear from an unexpected angle, hitting Xanthian vessels while they were focused elsewhere. They fought like a pack of predators, not like military vessels following standard tactics. A human destroyer, the Washington, took direct hits from a Xanthian cruiser. Krelver watched as the destroyer's shields failed, as hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. The logical move was to retreat, to save the crew, to preserve what fighting capability remained. Instead, the Washington's engines flared to maximum power. The ship turned not away from the cruiser but directly toward it. "What is that ship doing?" one of the Xanthian officers asked. Krelver realized the answer a second before impact. "It's ramming. They're going to ram." The Washington crashed into the Xanthian cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that briefly outshone the distant sun. Debris scattered in all directions. When the sensors cleared, both vessels were gone. Total destruction. Did they just... The officer couldn't finish the sentence. "They sacrificed their ship," Krelver said quietly, deliberately. "That's insane," Warlord Thexron said from his command chair. "That cruiser was worth 10 times what that destroyer cost. Why would they throw away a ship like that?" Krelver had no answer. The trade made no tactical sense. Unless the humans weren't thinking about cost ratios. Unless they were thinking about something else entirely, the battle continued and the pattern repeated. Again and again, human ships that were damaged, that were losing, that should have retreated, instead turned and charged directly at Xanthian vessels. They used their deaths as weapons, sacrificing themselves to take larger ships with them. A human frigate called the Defiance found itself surrounded by 5 Xanthian warships. The captain received a demand to surrender. Krelver watched on the tactical display as the frigate's response came through. "Surrender denied. See you in hell." The Defiance vented its atmosphere, using the explosive decompression to change direction suddenly. It crashed through the Xanthian formation, firing every weapon until the ship's power core overloaded. The explosion took 2 Xanthian ships with it. Krelver pulled up the crew manifest of the Defiance. Captain Nicole Sanders. She had a family on New Seattle, according to the intelligence files, 2 children, a husband. She had thrown her life away, and for what? To destroy 2 ships that could be replaced? Then something happened that Krelver would remember for the rest of his life. The human ships began broadcasting on all frequencies. Not military communications. Not tactical data, voices, civilian voices, a woman's voice, young and frightened but trying to sound brave. "Danny, this is your sister Jenny. I'm in New Portland on Harmony. Mom and Dad are with me. We're watching the sky. We can see the flashes from the battle. We just want you to know we love you. Come home safe?" A man's voice, older, weathered. "Chris, this is your father. I'm at the farm. The crop is almost ready to harvest. Your daughter helped me fix the irrigation system yesterday. She asks about you every day. Give them hell, son." A child's voice, maybe 10 cycles old. "Captain Foster, this is Amy. You taught me math last year. I got an A on my test. Thank you for protecting us. We're all proud of you." On and on. Hundreds of messages, broadcast from the planets below. Personal messages from civilians to the people fighting and dying in orbit above them. Messages from family, friends, neighbors, strangers. The Xanthian officers on the bridge looked uncomfortable. This wasn't normal warfare. This was something else, something they had no training for. Krelver understood what the humans were doing. They were reminding their soldiers why they fought. They were giving them something to die for. The Xanthian fleet broke through the human defensive line. Of the original 47 human warships, 31 were destroyed. 16 remained, all damaged, all running low on ammunition and power. Admiral Palmer ordered them to fall back to Harmony's atmosphere and continue fighting from there. The Xanthians had won the space battle. Now came the occupation. Warlord Dexron ordered landing forces to prepare. Bombardment of military installations on Harmony began. Missiles rained down on the human defensive positions. The humans had anti-air capabilities, but they were overwhelmed. Krelver watched the bombardment with growing unease. This should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like something darker. Then the sensors began detecting new contacts. "Sir," one of the officers said, confusion clear in their voice. "We're detecting multiple ships entering the system." "Hundreds of them. Reinforcements?" Dexron demanded. "Where did the humans hide a second fleet?" "They're not warships, sir," the officer replied. "They're everything else." "Mining ships?" "Cargo haulers, civilian transports, colony ships, even personal shuttles. They're all armed, all heading directly toward us." Krelver stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The signatures were unmistakable. These weren't military vessels. They were every single civilian ship in the 3 human systems, hundreds of them, all modified with whatever weapons the humans could attach. And they were all on collision courses with the Xanthian fleet. "They can't be serious," someone said. "Those ships aren't meant for combat. They'll be torn apart." An old human shuttle, a model that had to be at least 50 cycles old, approached the Eternal Dominance at maximum speed. The ship's identification came through the sensors. Pilot, Frank Peterson, age 72. Former evacuation transport captain. The Eternal Dominance's point defense systems opened fire, but the shuttle was small, maneuverable despite its age. It dodged most of the fire, took hits that should have destroyed it, and kept coming. Peterson's voice came through on an open channel. "This is for everyone who didn't make it off Earth. This is for every refugee who died in the dark. This is for my grandchildren sleeping on Harmony." The shuttle crashed into the Eternal Dominance's hangar bay. The explosion was massive, far larger than a simple shuttle should produce. Peterson had packed his ship with every explosive he could find. The Eternal Dominance shuddered. Alarms blared across the bridge. The main engines went offline. The flagship was crippled. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Dexron ordered, his voice tight with anger. "Target these civilian vessels. Destroy them all." But there were too many. A cargo hauler carrying farming equipment crashed into a Xanthian weapons platform. A mining ship, its hull reinforced for work in asteroid fields, rammed a cruiser hard enough to break the larger ship's spine. A passenger liner, evacuated of everyone except its crew of 12, drove itself into a Xanthian supply ship, causing a chain reaction of explosions. The battle turned into chaos. The Xanthian fleet was designed to fight other military forces, to engage in tactical combat. They had no doctrine for dealing with an enemy where every ship was a potential suicide weapon. Krelver watched as a young human fighter pilot, Emma Clark, according to the identification, fought off 3 Xanthian interceptors. Her ship was faster, more maneuverable, but hopelessly outgunned. She took hit after hit, her fighter coming apart around her. When her engines failed, she didn't eject. Instead, she used her remaining maneuvering thrusters to guide her dying ship directly toward the Eternal Dominance's bridge. Krelver had just enough time to register what was happening before the world exploded around him. When he regained consciousness, he was in a medical bay. The Eternal Dominance was listing, being towed by other ships. Half the bridge crew was dead. Warlord Dexron was among them. A medical officer filled him in on the situation. The battle had lasted 6 hours. The Xanthian fleet had won technically. The human space forces were destroyed. But of 300 Xanthian ships, only 97 remained functional. Over 200 vessels lost or damaged beyond repair. The human casualties were catastrophic. 41 warships destroyed. 412 civilian vessels lost. Nearly 20,000 humans dead, but Harmony still stood. New Seattle and Riverside were untouched. The Xanthian invasion had failed. Krelver requested access to the battle recordings. He spent hours reviewing the footage, trying to understand what he had witnessed. He watched Captain Kyle Brooks of the Washington. In the moments before his ship rammed the cruiser, Brooks was smiling. Terrified, yes, but smiling. His last words were recorded, "For Earth, for everyone who didn't make it this far." He watched Captain Nicole Sanders of the Defiance singing as her ship broke apart. A human religious song about grace. Her crew sang with her. These weren't soldiers drunk on glory. They were ordinary people who had decided that some things were worth dying for, Crelver began Excessi. Crelver walked through the tall doors of the council chamber with his head held high. His crystalline armor caught the light from 1,000 sources, sending rainbow patterns across the polished floor. He had served the Xanthian Collective for 40 cycles, and in that time he had seen countless species bow before their might. Today would be no different. The chamber was massive, built to hold representatives from 73 different species. Each one had their own section, their own flags and symbols hanging from the curved walls. Crelver took his place behind Warlord Thexron, the military commander of the Collective's Eastern Fleet. The Warlord's armor was darker than Crelver's, decorated with marks of conquest from a dozen worlds. The session began with minor trade, disputes and resource allocation requests. Crelver paid little attention. These small matters were beneath him. He was here for the main event, the petition from the humans. When the announcement came, Crelver leaned forward slightly. He had seen humans before, of course. They had arrived in the galaxy 15 years ago, stumbling out of the dark in slow ships that barely functioned. Their planet had been dying, they said. Climate collapse, resource depletion, all the usual failures of a species that couldn't manage its own home. The Council had given them 3 small worlds in the Outer Rim. Charity, really. The planets were marginally habitable, far from major trade routes, worth almost nothing. The humans had taken them with gratitude that bordered on desperation. Now they wanted more. The human delegation entered the chamber. There were 5 of them, dressed in simple dark suits that looked plain next to the elaborate clothing of other species. Crelver recognized the woman in front from previous sessions. Lisa Martinez, their ambassador. She was small, even for a human, with dark hair pulled back from her face. Her skin was brown, her eyes dark and steady. Behind her stood a man in military uniform. Commander Jake Holland, if Crelver remembered correctly. He was taller than Martinez, with short brown hair turning gray at the sides. His face showed no emotion as he scanned the chamber. Just another soldier, Crelver thought. Nothing special. Martinez approached the center platform and waited for recognition. When it came, she spoke clearly, her voice carrying through the vast space without electronic amplification. Honored members of the Galactic Council, I come before you today to request expansion of human territorial rights and increased trade access. Our colonies have grown beyond initial projections. We have 15 million citizens now spread across 3 worlds. Our agricultural output has exceeded expectations, and we have resources to trade. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared above her. It showed maps of the human colonies, population centers, farming zones, and proposed expansion areas. We request permission to settle 2 additional worlds in our current sector. Both are unclaimed, both are within the territory granted to us. We also request the establishment of trade routes with the Villor Consortium and the Draxian Commonwealth. Crelver studied the display with mild interest. The humans had been busy. He would grant them that. Their colonies were organized, efficient, but the requested worlds were close to Xanthian space, and the trade routes would give them access to markets the Collective controlled. Warlord Thexron stood, and the chamber fell silent. The Warlord's presence commanded attention. He had won battles on 30 worlds, crushed rebellions, and brought entire systems under Collective control. The Galactic Council recognizes the Xanthian Collective, the session moderator announced. Thexron's voice was deep, resonant, the kind of voice that expected obedience. The Collective has reviewed the human request. We find it unacceptable. Martinez's expression didn't change, but Crelver saw Commander Holland's jaw tighten slightly. The 2 worlds the humans wish to settle lie in a strategic zone, Thexron continued. Furthermore, the collective has determined that 3 of the worlds currently occupied by humans contain valuable mineral deposits that were not apparent during the initial survey. Krelver felt a small surge of satisfaction. The collective had discovered rare earth deposits on Harmony, one of the human worlds, 6 months ago. The deposits were worth a fortune, enough to fund a fleet expansion. Therefore, Dexron said, his voice carrying across the chamber, the collective hereby claims the worlds designated as Harmony, New Seattle, and Riverside. These worlds will be absorbed into collective territory resource extraction and industrial development. The humans currently residing there will be given 30 days to evacuate their populations. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Several species shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded in approval. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong took what they needed. The weak adapted or died. Martinez stood perfectly still for a moment. Then she spoke, and her voice had not changed at all. Still calm, still level. Those 3 worlds are home to nearly 2 million human citizens. They have built farms, schools, hospitals, entire communities. This is not just a resource claim. This is the displacement of our people from their homes. Your people should have chosen better worlds, Dexron replied. The collective's claim is legal under council law. Resources belong to those who can use them most effectively. We request mediation, Martinez said. We request time to negotiate an alternative solution. There is no alternative, Dexron said flatly. 30 days. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. Martinez turned to the rest of the council. I appeal to this body. Surely there must be another way. We have done nothing wrong. We have violated no laws. We have built peaceful colonies and asked for nothing but the right to exist. The chamber was silent. Krelver watched as representative after representative looked away. The Velar Consortium representative studied his notes. The Draxian Commonwealth ambassador found something fascinating on her datapad. The smaller species, the ones who might have sympathized, kept their heads down. No one wanted to challenge the Xanthian collective over a few human colonies. The political cost was too high. The session moderator, a being from a species Krelver could never remember the name of, spoke reluctantly. The council recognizes the legal validity of the collective's claim under current territorial laws. The matter is closed. Martinez stood in the center of the chamber for a long moment. Krelver expected anger, perhaps tears. These emotional species often showed their weakness in moments like this. But Martinez's face showed nothing. Commander Holland moved forward and placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. Not pulling her away, just a moment of contact. Then his hand dropped, and Martinez nodded once. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as would look back at her. Most looked away. We came to this council as refugees, Martinez said quietly. We asked for help, and you gave it. We asked for a place to rebuild, and you granted it. We have been grateful for 15 years. We have followed every law, paid every fee, respected every treaty. She paused, and in that pause, Krelver felt something strange. A sensation he couldn't quite name. Today we asked you to stand with us. To protect the homes we have built with our own hands. To acknowledge that we have rights, just like every other species in this chamber. Another pause. The chamber was absolutely silent now. You have chosen not to stand with us. We understand. We will remember this choice. Martinez turned and walked toward the exit. Her delegation followed, Commander Holland at her side. They did not hurry. They did not look back. They simply left. Krelver watched them go and felt nothing but certainty. The humans would evacuate. They had no choice. 47 ships against the might of the collective. It was barely worth calling a military action. More like pest control. As the chamber began to buzz with conversation again, Krelver made notes for his report. The human situation would be resolved within a month. After that, they would either accept their place in the galaxy's hierarchy or they would fade away entirely. Either way, it didn't matter. The strong survived. The weak did not. That was the natural order of things. Proven over thousands of years across hundreds of worlds, the humans would learn this lesson soon enough. NG Human Historical Databases. He should have done this before. He read about their wars, their conflicts, their history of fighting against impossible. Medical Bay was quiet except for the hum of machinery keeping Krelver alive, his crystalline. Alma had been shattered in the explosion that killed Warlord Dexron. Pieces of it were still embedded in his flesh, too dangerous to remove immediately. The doctor said he would live, but recovery would take months. He didn't care about recovery. He cared about understanding Dot from his bed. Krelver accessed every piece of data he could find about the Battle of Harmony. He watched the recordings over and over, analyzed every detail, tried to make sense of what had happened. The Xanthian collective had won, technically. They had destroyed the human fleet. They had achieved space superiority. By every military measure, they had succeeded. But they had lost over two-thirds of their ships. 20,000 humans had died, but the collective had lost nearly 50,000 of their own, and the humans still held their worlds. The invasion force had been too depleted to attempt a landing. The fleet had limped away, broken and defeated. Krelver kept returning to specific moments in the battle recordings. Captain Kyle Brooks ramming his destroyer into the cruiser. In the final seconds before impact, Brooks had been smiling. Not the smile of someone insane or brainwashed. The smile of someone who had made peace with their decision. The audio from his bridge was clear. One of his officers had asked if they should try to reach the escape pods. Brooks had replied simply, "No time." And besides, this matters more. More than what? More than his own life. More than survival. Krelver pulled up Brooks's service record. The man had been a cargo hauler captain before joining the Human Defense Force. He had a wife on Harmony, 2 daughters, 1 son. He had been 43 cycles old. He had died ramming a ship to save a planet where his family lived. That made sense, at least. Protecting one's family was a universal instinct. But what about Captain Nicole Sanders of the Defiance? Her family was on New Seattle, not Harmony. She had died defending a different world. Krelver accessed the recording of her final moments. The Defiance surrounded, doomed, Sanders making the choice to use her ship as a weapon. But it was her last words that haunted him. She had been singing a human religious hymn, something about amazing grace and being lost then found. Her crew had sung with her as the ship broke apart. No screaming, no panic. Just singing. He pulled up more files. Emma Clark, the fighter pilot who had crashed into the Eternal Dominance's bridge. She was 24 cycles old, barely an adult. Her parents ran a farming cooperative on Harmony. She had been studying to be a teacher before the war. She had no military training beyond 6 months of basic flight school. In her last transmission, recorded automatically by her fighter systems, she had been crying. But her voice was steady. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry I won't make it to dinner on Sunday. Tell the kids at school that Miss Clark tried her best. Tell them to be brave." Then she had died, guiding her broken ship into a target she had no chance of destroying alone. But she hadn't been alone. She was one of thousands making the same choice. Krelver expanded his research to human history. He had known some of it before, the broad strokes. Earth had suffered through countless wars, nearly destroyed itself. Several times, finally united only when facing extinction from climate collapse. But he had never looked at the details. He had never really studied what these wars meant, how humans fought them. He read about World War II, a conflict where humans killed each other by the tens of millions over ideology and territory. He read about the siege of Stalingrad, where humans ate bark and dead animals rather than surrender a city. He read about Leningrad, where 1 million people died, but the city never fell. He read about Vietnam, where a smaller force fought a superpower to exhaustion. About the Alamo, where fewer than 200 humans fought to the death against thousands. About Thermopylae, where 300 held a pass against an army. The pattern was clear. Humans had a capacity for sacrifice that transcended logic. When they believed in something strongly enough, they would die for it. Not occasionally, not rarely, but consistently across their entire history. Krelver found records of September 11th, an attack where humans flew aircraft into buildings, and other humans responded by running into burning structures to save strangers. Firefighters and police charging into collapsing towers, knowing they would probably die, doing it anyway because people needed help. He found records of soldiers throwing themselves on grenades to save their comrades, of sailors staying with sinking ships to give others time to escape, of civilians sheltering refugees at risk of their own lives. This wasn't just military conditioning. This was something fundamental to the species. They had a concept they called duty, another they called honor, a third they called sacrifice. These weren't just words. They were principles humans would die for. The Xanthian collective had fought thousands of battles against hundreds of species. They had won almost all of them because they understood the fundamental calculation of warfare. When the cost of fighting exceeds the value of winning, rational beings surrender, but humans weren't purely rational. They could look at an equation that said surrender and choose to keep fighting anyway. Because they valued things that couldn't be measured in ships or resources or territory. Krelver accessed the recording of Admiral Greg Palmer on the bridge of the Endeavour in the final moments of the battle. The flagship was dying, fires everywhere, half the crew dead or injured. Someone had asked if they should retreat. Palmer, this unremarkable-looking human with gray hair and tired eyes, had said, "We hold, because if we don't, who will?" Not because retreat was impossible, not because surrender wasn't an option, but because someone had to stand. Someone had to fight. Someone had to draw a line and say this far, no farther. Krelver began writing his report for the collective. It was the hardest document he had ever produced. How could he explain to his superiors, to a culture built on strength and dominance, that they had encountered a species that couldn't be conquered in the traditional sense? He wrote, "The humans can be exterminated, but they cannot be subjugated. They will fight to extinction rather than submit. Any attempt to conquer human space will cost more than any possible gain." He included tactical analyses, casualty figures, resource calculations. All the data said the same thing. Fighting humanity was too expensive. Even in victory, the collective would lose too much, but the data didn't capture the real truth. The truth was more disturbing. The Xanthian collective believed in hierarchy. The strong ruled the weak. That was natural law, proven across the galaxy. Species either accepted their place or were destroyed. Humanity rejected that entire framework. They looked at power and said it didn't matter. They looked at overwhelming force and said they would rather die free than live as subjects. And they meant it. Every single one of them meant it. Krelver had watched 20,000 humans die in 6 hours. Not one of them had surrendered. Not one had broken. They had died singing, smiling, crying, praying, but always fighting. That wasn't weakness. That was the most terrifying form of strength Krelver had ever encountered. He finished his report with a recommendation that he knew would be ignored. The collective should open negotiations with humanity. They should return the contested worlds and establish formal, peaceful relations. They should recognize that humans, despite their lack of physical strength or advanced technology, were too dangerous to fight, because humans didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought for ideas. And you couldn't kill an idea by destroying ships. Krelver submitted the report and lay back in his medical bed. His armor was shattered, his body broken, but those were wounds that would heal. The wound to his worldview, to everything he had believed about strength and power and the natural order, that wound would never fully close. He had seen humans unleash their fury. He had watched them turn themselves into weapons. He had witnessed a species that valued freedom more than survival, and it had torn apart everything he believed. 28 days passed like water through Krelver's claws. He spent most of that time aboard the Eternal Dominance, the collective's largest warship, preparing for what would surely be a simple operation. The humans would see reason. They had to. Reports came in daily from intelligence sources. The human colonies showed no signs of evacuation. Instead, they were building defenses. Missile batteries, shield generators, orbital platforms. All pathetically weak, but still, they were building. Krelver found it puzzling. Did they not understand mathematics? The collective was bringing 300 warships, 300 vessels that had conquered species far more advanced than humanity. What did the humans think they could accomplish with their handful of modified colony ships? On the 28th day, Ambassador Martinez returned to the council chamber. Krelver attended via holographic link from the Eternal Dominance. The fleet was already moving into position just outside human space, waiting for the deadline to expire. Martinez looked tired. Her face showed lines that hadn't been there a month ago. Dark circles under her eyes suggested little sleep, but her voice was still steady when she spoke. Honored Council, I request an emergency session to address the situation in human space. The session moderator granted her request, though several representatives looked annoyed at the interruption. Krelver could see Warlord Dexron on another holographic display. The Warlord looked bored. The deadline expires in 2 days, Martinez said. The Collective's fleet is already in position around our worlds. I have come to make one final plea for mediation. She activated a display showing real-time footage from the 3 contested worlds. Krelver watched with mild interest. The images showed cities, farms, schools full of children, hospitals, parks, all the trappings of civilization that would soon be dismantled. These are not just colonies to us, Martinez continued. Harmony has a population of 800,000. New Seattle has 600,000. Riverside has 400,000. These people were born there. They have built lives there. For many, these are the only homes they have ever known. They can build new homes elsewhere, Warlord Dexron said, his voice cutting through Martinez's words. The collective has already offered transport assistance for the evacuation. Our people refuse to leave, Martinez said simply. That caused a stir in the chamber. Krelver felt a flicker of interest. Refuse to leave? That was ... wise. Then they will be removed by force, Dexron said. The collective has been patient. We have given the humans 30 days, more than most species would receive. If they choose to remain, that is their decision. They will face the consequences. Martinez stood silent for a moment, then turned to address the full council. I ask this body one more time. Intervene, mediate, give us more time. Give us any solution that does not involve displacing 2 million innocent people. The Velar Consortium representative spoke up, their voice careful. Perhaps an extension of the deadline would be appropriate, to allow for more negotiation. The collective does not negotiate what is already ours, Dexron said. We have claimed these worlds legally. The matter is closed. A vote was called. Several species abstained. The smaller powers voted for mediation, but they were too few. The motion failed. Krelver watched Martinez's face as the vote totals appeared. He expected to see defeat, perhaps despair. Instead, he saw something that made him uncomfortable. Her expression hardened, not with anger, but with something else. Determination, maybe. Or acceptance. She looked directly at the holographic projection of Warlord Dexron. Then she looked at Krelver, though he hadn't spoken. It was as if she knew he was watching, knew what he represented. We asked you to stand with us, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Every one of you. We asked you to do the right thing. To protect the innocent. To show that the Galactic Council means something more than just the strong taking from the weak. She paused, and in that pause the chamber was absolutely silent. You chose not to stand with us. You chose to look away. You chose to let this happen because it was easier, because it was safer, because you didn't want to risk angering the collective. Martinez picked up her data pad and began walking toward the exit. But before she reached the doors, she stopped and turned back. We will remember this. All of us. Every human in this galaxy will remember that when we needed you, you abandoned us. And we will never forget. She left. Commander Holland and the rest of the delegation followed. The doors closed behind them with a sound that seemed too loud in the silent chamber. Krelver disconnected from the holographic link and returned to the bridge of the Eternal Dominance. Warlord Dexron was already there, reviewing the final attack plans with his senior officers. The humans are making empty threats, one of the officers said. Our intelligence shows their fleet is prepared to fight, but it's suicide. They must know that. Perhaps they don't believe we'll actually attack civilian populations, another officer suggested. X single quotes. Ron laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. Then they're fools. We have given them every opportunity to comply peacefully. What happens now is their own fault. Krelver said nothing. He was thinking about Martinez's face, about that look of determination, about her words. We will remember this. 2 days later, the deadline expired. Admiral Greg Palmer, commander of the Human Defense Fleet, sent a message to the collective. Krelver listened to it on the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, surrounded by Xanthian officers who smirked and laughed at the human's audacity. Palmer's face filled the display. He was an older human, maybe 60 cycles, with gray hair and a face marked by time. He wore a military uniform that looked worn but clean. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was visible. Smaller than the Eternal Dominance's bridge, less advanced, but organized and efficient. This is Admiral Greg Palmer of the Human Defense Force, speaking for the free people of Harmony, New Seattle, and Riverside. You have demanded that we abandon our homes. You have threatened our citizens. You have ignored our appeals for peace. Palmer's voice was calm, almost conversational. He could have been discussing weather patterns. We hereby inform the Xanthian Collective that any attempt to enter human space, any attempt to land forces on human worlds, any act of aggression against human citizens will be considered an act of war. We will defend our territory with all available forces. Laughter rippled through the Eternal Dominance's bridge. Someone made a joke about human bravery being inversely proportional to human intelligence. You are outnumbered 7-1, Palmer continued. You have superior weapons, superior ships, superior technology. By every logical calculation, we should surrender. We should evacuate. We should accept that this is how the galaxy works and move on. He paused and his expression changed. Not to anger, but to something Krelver couldn't quite identify. But we're human. And humans don't surrender their homes just because someone tells them to. We don't abandon our families because it's the logical choice. We don't give up just because the odds are bad. Palmer leaned forward slightly, looking directly into the camera. So here's our answer, Warlord Dexron. You want our worlds? Come and take them. But know this. Every meter of space you take, you'll pay for. Every human you kill will cost you. We won't make this easy. We won't make this clean. And when it's over, win or lose, you'll remember us. You'll remember the price you paid. And maybe, just maybe, you'll think twice before you try this again with someone else. The transmission ended. The bridge of the Eternal Dominance was silent for a moment. Then Warlord Dexron stood from his command chair. Brave words from a dead man, he said. All ships prepare to jump. Target Harmony first. We'll crush their fleet, secure the planet, then move on to the other 2 worlds. This will be over in a day. Krelver watched the tactical displays as the collective fleet prepared to jump. 300 ships against 47. It wasn't even a fair fight. It was an execution. The jump was smooth. One moment they were in deep space. The next they were dropping back into normal space in the Harmony system. Krelver's first action was to check the sensor displays. The human fleet was there, exactly where intelligence said it would be. All 47 ships arranged in a defensive formation around Harmony. They were close together, creating overlapping fields of fire. A good defensive position, but ultimately meaningless against such overwhelming force. Warlord Dexron opened a final communication channel. Human ships, this is your last chance. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated as prisoners of war under Galactic Convention. Refuse, and you will be destroyed. There was a long pause. Then Admiral Palmer's voice came through, just 2 words that would echo through the galaxy for years to come. Come try. The battle began. 3 weeks after the Battle of Harmony, Krelver stood in the council chamber once again. His armor had been repaired, the cracks filled with bonding material that showed silver against the natural crystal. He would carry those scars forever. Visible reminders of the day the Xanthian Collective learned that strength was not enough. He was here as the collective's representative. Most of the senior leadership had died at Harmony. Warlord Thexron, 2 admirals, dozens of senior officers. The collective was in disarray, trying to understand how they had lost so badly while technically winning. The chamber was more crowded than usual. Every species wanted to see what would happen next. The humans had done the impossible. They had fought off the Xanthian Collective, one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. Ambassador Lisa Martinez entered the chamber with Commander Jake Holland at her side. She looked even more tired than before, thinner, with deeper lines around her eyes. Krelver had learned that her nephew, Carlos Martinez, had died defending New Seattle. A fighter pilot, 26 cycles old, killed when his ship was destroyed by a Xanthian cruiser. The galaxy expected Martinez to demand reparations, to threaten further action, to leverage humanity's unexpected victory. Instead, she simply stood in the center of the chamber and waited for recognition. When it came, she spoke quietly. The Battle of Harmony is over. 20,000 humans died defending their homes. We mourn them. We honor their sacrifice. And we ask that this never happen again. She activated a display showing the 3 contested worlds. Not battle footage this time, but images of communities. Schools where children learned, hospitals where doctors worked, farms where families grew food. Peace, not war. These colonies were never military installations, Martinez continued. They were homes. Communities of refugees trying to rebuild after losing everything. Every person who died at Harmony died protecting something simple, the right to exist in peace. She turned to face Krelver directly. The Xanthian Collective claimed our worlds because they could. Because they had the power. Because that's how this galaxy works. The strong take from the weak. The chamber was silent. Martinez took a breath and continued. We have proven that we are not weak. We have shown that we can fight, that we can make even victory too expensive to be worth the cost. But we don't want to prove that again. We don't want more battles, more death, more destruction. We want peace. Krelver had been given authority to speak for the collective. He stood, and every eye in the chamber turned to him. This was the moment that would define the next era of galactic politics. The Xanthian Collective acknowledges its error, he said, the words difficult but necessary. We underestimated humanity. We assumed that because they lacked physical strength and advanced technology, they would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. We were wrong. He paused, gathering his thoughts. What he was about to say went against every tradition of his people. The collective formally withdraws all claims to the human worlds of Harmony, New Seattle, and Riverside. These worlds belong to humanity, now and forever. We will pay reparations for the destruction caused during the battle. We will compensate the families of those who died. And we will support humanity's application for full council membership with all rights and protections. The chamber erupted in noise. Several species protested. Others applauded. The smaller powers, the ones who had lived in fear of conquest, looked at each other with something like hope. Krelver waited for silence, then continued. I witnessed the Battle of Harmony. I saw humans sacrifice themselves to protect their homes. I saw ordinary civilians turn their ships into weapons. I saw courage that I did not know existed. He looked at Martinez, then at the rest of the council. The Xanthian Collective has learned a painful lesson. Military strength is not the same as the will to use it. We can destroy human ships, but we cannot break human spirit. Any further conflict with humanity would be too costly even in victory. Martinez nodded slowly, acknowledging Krelver's words. Then she turned back to the council. The collective has offered peace. We accept, but we ask for something more. Something that will prevent this from happening again, not just to us, but to any species. She brought up a document on the central display. I propose the Harmony Accords, a new set of laws governing territorial rights and military action within council space. Krelver read the proposal with interest. It was simple but revolutionary. The Accords would establish that all species had the right to self-determination and territorial sovereignty. Force could only be used in cases of active aggression or genocide. No more conquest for resources. No more the strong taking from the weak. "This is absurd," one of the larger species representatives said. "You're asking us to abandon thousands of years of tradition. The strong have always ruled. That's natural law." Martinez's expression hardened. "Natural law? We just fought a battle that killed 20,000 of my people. We turned civilians into soldiers, turned cargo ships into weapons, turned ordinary people into heroes who died for a principle. That's not natural law. That's desperation." She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as would meet hers. "Every species here has a choice. You can continue to live in a galaxy where might makes right, where the powerful take from the weak, where everyone lives in fear of being conquered. Or you can join us in building something better. A galaxy where all species have rights, where strength is used to protect, not to dominate." The debate lasted for days. Many species resisted. They had built their power on the old system. But others, the smaller powers who had suffered under that system, supported humanity strongly. In the end, the Harmony Accords passed by a narrow margin. The galaxy would never be the same. Krelver had one final conversation with Commander Jake Holland before the human delegation left. They met in a private room overlooking the station's observation deck, with the stars spread out before them. "Your people think we're weak," Holland said without preamble. "You thought we'd surrender because that's the rational choice." Krelver didn't deny it. "Yes, we measured your military strength and found it inadequate. We failed to measure your will." Holland nodded. "We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest or the longest lived. We don't have natural weapons or armor. By every physical measure, we're weak." He turned from the window to face Krelver directly. "But we're the species that looked at a dying Earth and decided to keep fighting. We're the species that built ships out of desperation and shot ourselves into space on controlled explosions because we refused to give up. We're the species that invented dying for something you believe in." "That concept is not unique to humans," Krelver said quietly. "Maybe not," Holland agreed. "But we perfected it. Every human who died at Harmony made a choice. They weren't brainwashed or following orders blindly. They looked at their families, their homes, their future, and decided those things were worth their lives." He paused, and his voice became harder. "That's not weakness. That's humanity. And if anyone threatens us again, they'll see it again. Because we'll never stop fighting for what's ours. Never." Krelver believed him. He had seen the proof written in fire and blood across the space around Harmony. Weeks later, back in Xanthian space, Krelver visited the memorial being built for those who died in the battle. The collective was calling it a victory, but everyone knew the truth. They had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. He also accessed the human memorial list. 20,000 names. Soldiers and civilians, young and old, people from every Earth nation and culture, all united in their willingness to die rather than surrender. Some names stood out. Kyle Brooks, who had smiled as he rammed his destroyer into a cruiser. Nicole Sanders, who sang hymns as her frigate broke apart. Frank Peterson, the elderly shuttle pilot who had crippled the Eternal Dominance. Emma Clark, barely an adult, who had crashed into the bridge and changed galactic history. They were all ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. Not because they were special, but because when the moment came, they had chosen principle over survival. Krelver began writing, not a report this time, but something more personal. A record of what he had witnessed, what he had learned. He titled it, "I saw humans unleash their fury, and it tore apart all I believed." Because that was the truth. He had believed that strength meant physical power, military might, the ability to dominate others. The humans had shown him a different kind of strength. The strength to stand when logic said to kneel. The strength to fight when mathematics said to surrender. The strength to die for something bigger than yourself. That strength couldn't be measured in ships or weapons. It couldn't be calculated or predicted. It was something that existed in the space between reason and faith, between survival and meaning. The harmony accords were holding. The smaller species were breathing easier, protected by laws that the powerful had to respect. And humanity, the species everyone had dismissed, had become the symbol of resistance, of the right to exist on your own terms. They had unleashed their fury not in conquest, but in defense. Not to dominate, but to survive. And in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. Krelver finished his writing and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out